The video begins the moment the protagonist's heart races. The room is illuminated by bright lights, huge panels display graphics of the new product, and the entire space vibrates with the typical energy of large corporate events. Everyone expected it to be a day of celebration, but no one anticipated what was about to happen. The board of directors takes the stage, announces the much-talked-about annual bonus, and when the protagonist's colleague's name is called, the audience erupts in applause. People shout, stand, and clap enthusiastically, as if they were watching the final of a championship. The protagonist smiles politely, but inside he feels the weight of a shattered expectation. For a second, he believes his name won't be announced. That, once again, he will be ignored as he has been in recent years. But then the unexpected happens. "We are now calling the person responsible for a new international company initiative," says the director. The room falls silent. Eyes turn in all directions. When the protagonist's name echoes through the speakers, the reaction is completely different from that of their colleague. There is no applause. There is no celebration. Just a confused murmur filling the auditorium. People exchange glances, trying to understand what it means. Some raise their eyebrows, others frown, as if trying to decipher whether it was a reward, a punishment, or a corporate prank. The protagonist, confused, walks to the stage, feeling his heart tighten in his chest. Each step seems heavier than the last. His mind races, creating questions that have no immediate answer. Did they do this to humiliate him? Is it some mission that no one wanted to take on? Does this mean more work and less recognition? Or is there something much bigger behind that silent announcement than he imagines? The emotional camera focuses precisely on that moment. A man standing before a confused audience, trying to understand if he's receiving the company's biggest mistake or the greatest opportunity of his life. Even before the event began, the atmosphere in the company was already thick with anticipation. For weeks, the hallways were filled with whispered comments, bold predictions, and veiled bets on who would receive the coveted annual bonus. It was almost a ritual. Whenever the launch of a major product approached, management highlighted certain names to receive public recognition, and this recognition almost always came with a generous check, applause, photos, and a status that echoed for months afterward. Inside, that's how success was measured, by the noise made when a name was announced on stage. The protagonist knew this dynamic well. Since joining the company, he had always been the type of professional who worked behind the scenes, delivering consistent results, solving problems that no one wanted to face, and keeping entire projects afloat without expecting applause. But, precisely for that reason, his name was rarely mentioned in important meetings. Meanwhile, his colleague, the same one who would end up receiving the big bonus, seemed to shine effortlessly. He was the boss's favorite, the darling who always received public praise, even when his real contribution wasn't as profound as it seemed. He had charisma, knew how to position himself, and mastered the art of appearing at the right times. The other employees noticed this too. Before the event, they commented amongst themselves that the bonus already had an owner, and many didn't even consider that the protagonist could be an option, not because he didn't deserve it, but because he simply wasn't part of the inner circle, that select group that received praise on stage while the rest bore the brunt of the hard work. This contrast created a silent wound. The protagonist delivered more than anyone else, but public recognition never came. He was the kind of essential, yet invisible, professional, and that invisibility hurt. Behind every well-executed task, there was the simple desire to be seen, to be valued, to hear his name called even once in that noisy auditorium. That's precisely why, when the event began, the protagonist didn't have high hopes. He was already emotionally prepared to applaud his colleague once again. He just didn't imagine that night everything would change, not with applause, but with silence. The auditorium was packed. As always happened at the company's big launches, colorful lights streaked. Across the ceiling, giant screens displayed promotional videos, and the carefully chosen music created the feeling that everyone there was about to witness something historic. It was the kind of environment where every detail seemed planned to impress, from the arrangement of the chairs to the metallic sheen of the stage. Employees smiled, took photos, recorded stories, excited about what was to come. The protagonist, even accustomed to these events, felt the butterflies in his stomach that always arose when he allowed himself, even for a few seconds, the hope of being recognized. The board of directors took to the stage, and the atmosphere of anticipation grew. The CEO began his speech praising the collective effort, speaking about the importance of collaboration, innovation, and the commitment of each team member. The words were beautiful, well-rehearsed, almost inspiring, but for the speaker, they were also all too familiar. He had heard similar speeches many times, and they almost always ended with the same conclusion: applause for some, silence for many. The audience listened attentively to every phrase, awaiting the most anticipated moment of the event, the announcement of the individual awards. It was there that the real tension began. People adjusted themselves in their seats, exchanging quick, discreet glances, trying to guess who would be called. The protagonist took a deep breath, knowing his chances were slim. Still, a very small part of him insisted on believing that perhaps this time something different could happen. When the boss began reading his colleague's name, the room erupted in euphoria. Shouts, whistles, applause, as if everyone had rehearsed that reaction beforehand. The protagonist also applauded, but the sound of his own hands clapping seemed hollow. While his colleague went up on stage smiling, taking photos and receiving the big bonus, the protagonist felt his hope dissolve like vapor. Right there, in that instant, he was absolutely certain that he wouldn't be called. There would be no surprise. There would be no recognition. The festive atmosphere that filled the entire room contrasted violently with the emptiness forming inside him. He was already prepared to accept yet another silent defeat, until unexpectedly, the microphone picked up new words that would change everything, opening a path completely different from the one he had imagined. When the colleague's name echoed through the speakers, the auditorium almost trembled with the explosion of applause. It was as if the room had been swept away by a wave of enthusiasm that swept through everyone present. People rose from their seats. Some clapped above their heads, others whistled loudly, and even normally, serious executives broke into broad smiles to celebrate the house favorite. The colleague walked onto the stage with confident steps, waving as if he were receiving an international award, not just a corporate bonus. The camera on the screen focused on his satisfied face, and the spotlights turned exclusively to him, leaving the rest of the room in shadow. While everyone celebrated, the protagonist remained seated, forcing a smile that concealed an inner turmoil. Outwardly, he seemed like just another employee applauding his colleague's success. Inside, however, an uncomfortable mix of emotions grew with each passing second. There was envy, not for the amount of money, but for the public recognition, for the validation that always seemed to slip through his fingers. There was sadness because he knew once again that his invisible effort would not be remembered that night. And there was the bitter feeling of injustice, the kind that settles in when you know you did more, delivered more, sacrificed more, and yet you are treated as if you were just a shadow. The protagonist watched his colleague receive the golden check with the company logo, posing for photos, receiving hugs and warm congratulations. Each camera flash was like a reminder of how invisible he remained. He took a deep breath, trying to control the tightness in his chest. He remembered sleepless nights, deadlines met, crises resolved without anyone noticing. He remembered the moments when he could have given up, but didn't. And despite all that, there he was, sitting silent, just another background piece in that corporate theater. He was already used to this role, used to seeing others shine while he carried the weight of hard work, used to waiting for recognition that never came. At that moment, he was absolutely certain nothing would change. Not that day, not at that company. He had already silently accepted yet another defeat. But little did he know, in that exact moment when he felt most ignored, that the unexpected was just moments away from happening, and that everything he believed in was about to be completely turned upside down. As the euphoria over the applause for his colleague began to subside, the protagonist was already preparing to hear the closing of the event. He straightened his posture, picked up his cell phone, and was ready to put away his badge when a phrase from the director made him freeze. And now, a special announcement for an international project. The auditorium, still buzzing with excitement over the recently awarded bonus, suddenly fell silent. Some employees looked up, others frowned, trying to understand if this was part of the official script. Then, the protagonist's name came through the loudspeakers. Clear, direct, unexpected. The shock was immediate. There was no applause, there were no shouts, there was no celebration. The reaction was completely different from what his colleague had received minutes before. Instead of celebration, there was a general murmur. What is that? Global territory rights, what does that even mean? Is this a promotion or a punishment. It was a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and a certain amount of distrust. It seemed that nobody, absolutely nobody, knew exactly what that title meant. The colleague from the bonus program frowned, leaning forward as if trying to decipher an unknown language, and for the first time that night, the protagonist realized that all eyes were on him, not with admiration, but with complete astonishment. Completely bewildered, he slowly stood up. His hands were sweating, his heart pounding in his throat, and he didn't know whether to smile to appear confident or maintain a serious expression to show respect. Each step toward the stage felt heavier than the last. He had the sensation of walking into uncharted territory, without a map, without instructions, without knowing if this would change his life or complicate it even further. When he finally arrived on stage, the director didn't hand over a golden check or a shiny trophy. He handed him one plain white envelope without embellishments. It was completely different from the others, a discreet, almost modest object, but one that carried a weight that no one there seemed to understand. The director shook her hand firmly, looked directly into her eyes, and said in a low voice, too low for the audience to hear, "This isn't for now. It's for what you're going to build from now on." The protagonist swallowed hard, trying to understand what it all meant. The audience remained restless, whispering incessantly, and there, under the intense stage lights, with a mysterious envelope in his hands, he realized he had been chosen, but for something that no one, not even he, was prepared to understand at that moment. When the protagonist finally leaves the stage and returns to his seat, the mysterious envelope seems to weigh more than it should. He holds it carefully, as if he might break something valuable inside. The audience still murmurs, trying to guess its contents. Some make low jokes, others try to appear indifferent, but everyone, absolutely everyone, keeps a furtive eye on it. It's as if that piece of paper has become the invisible center of the room. With trembling hands and a racing heart, he takes a deep breath before opening the envelope. The silent sound of the paper tearing contrasts with the murmur around him. When he finally slides the document out, his eyes quickly scan the first paragraphs and stop. He had to reread it twice to make sure he was interpreting it correctly. It was an official document, signed by the board of directors, and it was much more than any bonus. There, in formal and direct language, was the confirmation. He had been appointed global manager for a new strategic territory. This was a newly opened area in the international market, with enormous potential for expansion. It wasn't just recognition, it was a vote of confidence in the future, an invitation to take the lead in something that could redefine his entire career. But the audience didn't know that, and, ironically, he didn't even care. There was no applause when he read the document. There was no music, photos, emotional speeches or hugs. There was no cinematic moment that everyone expects when someone receives a great opportunity. Just silence, and that silence spoke volumes. While his colleagues celebrated his immediate bonus, a quick, noisy, fleeting gleam, the protagonist, sitting alone, held something no one seemed to see, something that would grow slowly, like a powerful seed planted in fertile soil. The document detailed privileges that would make any experienced executive's eyes widen: unlimited access to new markets, percentage participation in expansion profits, international autonomy, strategic travel, meetings with global boards, and most shockingly of all, priority right for future branches in that territory. It was a gift in disguise, a treasure covered by plain paper, a silent power that would only reveal its true value with time. While the room remained distracted, still discussing their colleague's bonus, the protagonist felt a shiver run down his spine. For the first time that night, he realized that perhaps, just perhaps, he had received something greater than he had ever dared to dream of, and nobody, absolutely nobody there, had any idea about it. When the protagonist finally puts the document back in the envelope, he realizes the entire room is watching him with uneasy curiosity. It's not admiration, it's not celebration, it's something more uncomfortable, almost acidic. His colleagues exchange glances and whisper in hushed tones, trying to piece together a puzzle whose pieces they don't understand. Some frown, others look away at their phones, but everyone somehow continues to spy. The air seems heavier, as if the room has been enveloped in a fog of speculation. Some comments slip from closer corners. Global. What? Is this really a good thing? It seems like double the work. Or is it a hidden promotion? Nobody knows for sure. And the unknown, as always, generates discomfort. The colleague who received the bonus observes everything from afar, trying to maintain a calm expression. He smiles, chats with other employees, holds the golden check in a way that draws attention, but it's impossible not to notice the tension in his facial muscles when he looks at the protagonist. Deep down, he's not celebrating as much as he seems. The shine of his award, so applauded moments before, now seems overshadowed by the mystery surrounding the protagonist's envelope. There's something unsettling about the lack of information. The bonus is clear. Very clear. Everyone knows the value, knows the impact, knows the immediate prestige. Must global territory rights. Nobody understands, and what is not understood creates insecurity. The protagonist, still processing the document's contents, notices this change in atmosphere. He feels curious glances and also envious looks. Some people try to approach him, asking with false politeness, "Congratulations," whatever that means. Others keep their distance, as if he had been given a dangerous mission. And some simply avoid eye contact, as if afraid to admit their own curiosity. The colleague who received the bonus tries to hide his discomfort. He laughs too loudly, speaks louder than usual, as if he wants to reaffirm his moment of glory. But when he thinks no one is looking, he casts quick, squinting glances at the envelope still in the protagonist's hands. The glances of someone who knows that perhaps he received the celebration, but not the most valuable prize. And it is in this silent contrast that the truth begins to emerge. The bonus is paying out now, but territory gives power later on. While the others are still trying to decipher what it all means, the protagonist begins to realize that, contrary to what he initially thought, perhaps he wasn't ignored, perhaps he was chosen. And this completely changes the energy in the room. The days following the event seem strange from the very first moment. The very next morning, before the protagonist even finishes his coffee, his email starts flooding with messages he's never received before. Invitations to international meetings, requests for conversations from directors of other branches, formal greetings from people he barely knows. He reads everything cautiously, as if still suspecting something is wrong, but soon realizes it's no coincidence. The document he received on stage, that seemingly simple envelope, has begun circulating among high-ranking executives, and now everyone wants to speak with him. Suddenly, doors that had always been closed begin to open automatically. Executives who previously barely greeted him in the hallway now call him by name, smile broadly, and ask questions about his vision for the new territory. Some offer support, others try to probe for information, and some even let slip small displays of disguised envy. The change is so abrupt that it becomes uncomfortable. People who never noticed him before begin to treat him as if they had always believed in him. The protagonist, still adjusting to the silent impact of the document, begins to realize something essential. His colleague's bonus created a celebration, noise, applause. It generated photos and videos on internal networks, became a topic of conversation for a few hours, but it ended there. It was consumed the moment it was delivered, but the document, that one indeed, seemed to have a life of its own. He opens doors, create connections. It changes the way everyone sees him. In a meeting with an international director, he hears something that makes him shudder. Global territory rights is not just a job title, it's a license for the future. The phrase echoes in his mind all day. He begins to realize the depth of the opportunity. That role, so discreet, is practically a pass to strategic decisions, to previously unattainable markets, to high-value contracts, to influences that only great leaders have. It is, as he himself begins to mentally call it, the key to the castle. Meanwhile, the colleague, who won the bonus, continues to be remembered, but less and less. His celebration has become just a post on the intranet and half a dozen comments. His great victory is already being replaced by the usual routine. The protagonist, however, senses that something entirely new is happening. The world around him is spinning differently. Doors are open. The table where he always wanted to sit finally has a chair pulled out for him. And at that moment, he understands clearly. The bonus was a one-day party. But the territory is the entire future. The months following the event reveal the stark difference between an immediate reward and a strategic opportunity. The colleague who received the bonus shows up at the company driving a new car. Sporty, noisy, clearly bought to impress. He always parks in the most visible spot, makes a point of mentioning the advantageous financing he secured, and shows off the vehicle as if it were a trophy. For a few days, Everyone talks about the car, takes pictures, asks for details. But like all fleeting glamour, the interest begins to wane as quickly as it appeared. The bonus was spent almost as fast as it was received. Meanwhile, the protagonist follows a completely different path. He spends weeks analyzing markets, talking to subsidiaries, gathering data and building strategies to launch the new territory. International meetings become part of his routine. With each video conference, he realizes that his position is not merely symbolic, it has real weight. Executives from other countries listen to his ideas, ask for his opinion, and treat his presence as indispensable. And then, on a seemingly ordinary morning, the turning point happens. During a meeting with a foreign company interested in a partnership, he presents his vision for the territory, showing figures, trends, and expansion possibilities. The conversation progresses so naturally that he hardly notices when the negotiations enter their final phase. At the end of the afternoon, he receives the message that would change everything. The first international contract has been signed. The signing represents something much bigger than a simple agreement. It opens the doors to a whole chain of future projects, increases the company's revenue, places his name among the strategic leaders, and, most importantly, activates for the first time his direct participation in the territory's profits. A profit that, alone, already exceeds the value of the bonus received by his colleague. And this is just the first. It is at this moment that he understands, deeply, without doubt, without fear, the true value of what he has received. Territorial rights were not just a document, it was a silent, continuous, ever-growing gold mine. Something that only gains strength over time, unlike a bonus, which evaporates with the first impulsive purchase. And then, an even more powerful realization dawns on him. The board of directors always knew this. They knew their colleague needed a buzz to stay motivated. They knew the protagonist was the kind of person capable of turning a modest opportunity into an empire. They knew the territory would be worth more than any bonus. While his colleague no longer shines as brightly as he did during the event, the protagonist begins to rise, not through applause but through results. And there, in that moment of silent victory, he understands that he received not the most flashy prize, but the most intelligent one. When the protagonist looks back, remembering that day in the auditorium, he can hardly believe that it all began with silence. While his colleague received thunderous applause, camera flashes, and a golden check that caught everyone's attention, he received only a white envelope. No celebration, no immediate recognition, only doubt, confusion, and an emotional weight that seemed greater than any announcement. At that moment, he couldn't see, no one could, that this would be the turning point in his life. Today, however, everything makes sense. He realizes that his emotional journey was just as important as his professional one. He started the day of the event frustrated, feeling invisible, disposable, forgotten once again. Each round of applause given to his colleague seemed like an echo of the injustice accumulated over the years. But, as the days passed and the document began to silently open doors, he understood that life doesn't always reward with fanfare. Often, it delivers treasures, wrapped in simplicity. Sometimes the quietest gift is the one that changes your whole life. This phrase now makes sense to him in an almost spiritual way. It wasn't the noise that transformed his future. It was what happened away from the cameras, away from the applause, away from other people's expectations. It was what nobody valued, what nobody understood, what nobody celebrated in that first moment. He remembers how his heart ached when he thought he'd been ignored. And now, months later, he realizes that feeling was just the beginning of a much bigger revelation, that the true value of opportunities lies not in how brightly they shine, but in how much they grow. The protagonist, who previously saw himself as a supporting character, now understands that he has been given the lead role. Not the most glamorous one, but the most enduring. His frustration has transformed into clarity, and clarity has transformed into strength. He has learned to see beyond the moment, beyond the noise, beyond appearances. And it is at this point that he connects with the viewer. What shines brightest in front of everyone else isn't always what truly shapes the future. Often, it's what no one sees, what no one celebrates, what no one understands. That paves the way for your greatest growth. The video concludes with this powerful message, leaving the audience to reflect on their own unseen opportunities, those that may seem small today, but which may be silently guiding the way to something much greater. And you? Have you ever received something that seemed small, inconspicuous, or even worthless, but that later completely changed your life? Share your story in the comments. It could inspire someone today. If this video touched you, leave a like. Spread this message by sharing it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel to follow more exciting and transformative stories like this one.